The first time I realized something was wrong, she didn't recognize her own reflection. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, water running uselessly in the sink, staring as if a stranger had broken into our home and borrowed her face. When I asked her name, she answered calmly without fear, but with the wrong one. That was the moment my life split into two unbearable questions. What happened to my aunt? And what happened to my wife? Her name was Sarah. My wife, my companion of 7 years, the woman who knew how I took my tea and why I hated sudden loud laughter. But once, long before she became my wife, there had been another woman in my life who looked exactly like her. My Aunt Samira. Samira vanished 20 years ago, leaving behind only rumors, broken furniture, and a family that learned to stop asking questions. And now, the woman sleeping beside me carried Sarah's face, but sometimes spoke with Samira's voice. Sarah had always been strong. Life had demanded it of her early. She lost her father at 12, worked her way through college with part-time jobs that left her hands cracked and bleeding, and married into a family that smiled politely while quietly measuring her worth. I admired her resilience, but I didn't realize how deeply she had learned to survive by hiding pieces of herself. The cracks first appeared after she started her new job. It was a prestigious position at a private firm. Long hours, ruthless competition, men who smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. She came home exhausted, eyes dulled, shoulders tense. Some nights she cried in the shower, thinking I couldn't hear. Other nights she sat silent, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Photos I didn't recognize. "Who is she?" I asked once, pointing to a faded image of a young woman in a red dupatta, standing in front of our ancestral house. Sarah froze. "That's family," she said after a pause too long to ignore. Her behavior shifted slowly, like a tide pulling back before a storm. She forgot dates. She started calling my mother Baji the way my aunt used to. She hummed an old lullaby no one had sung in decades. And sometimes late at night, she would whisper things that didn't belong to our marriage. Names of people long dead, places long burned down. I took her to doctors. They spoke of stress, dissociation, emotional overload. One suggested trauma that had found a voice. Another hinted at suppressed identity fractures. But none of them knew our family history. When I finally asked my mother about Samira, her face drained of color. "Don't dig up graves," she warned. "Some disappearances are merciful." That night, I searched through old trunks in the storage room. Beneath yellowed wedding cards and rusted bangles, I found a police report from 20 years ago. Marked missing, presumed dead. Samira, age 24. The photograph attached made my stomach drop. Samira looked exactly like Sarah. Not similar. Not familiar. Identical. I confronted Sarah with the file. She read it silently, fingers trembling, lips pressed tight. Then she looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Older, colder, filled with a sorrow that didn't belong to a woman in her early 30s. "She was betrayed," she said softly. "By people she trusted. By a man who promised safety." My voice shook. "Sarah, how do you know that?" She smiled sadly. "Because I remember." That night, she didn't sleep beside me. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, rocking gently, whispering, "I survived. I survived." And for the first time I was afraid. Not of losing my wife, but of discovering who she truly was. The truth didn't come all at once. It came in fragments, memories leaking through the cracks of a mind that had been sealed shut for survival. Sarah, or the woman wearing her name, told me everything over several nights. Each confession felt like tearing open an old wound neither of us was prepared to see bleed. Samira hadn't died. She had been erased. At 24, Samira was married off to a man twice her age. Respected, wealthy, cruel behind closed doors. When she tried to leave, her own family silenced her. Divorce was shame. Escape was dishonor. Her husband beat her into obedience, then staged her disappearance after she threatened to expose him. She ran away, they told the neighbors. Eloped. Disgraced us. In truth, Samira barely escaped with her life. She was smuggled out with help from a distant relative, stripped of her identity, renamed, relocated. Trauma did the rest. Her mind fractured under the weight of fear and betrayal, burying Samira so deeply that only a new woman could survive. That woman became Sarah. She built a life from nothing. New name, new city, new memories layered over old scars. She didn't know she was Samira, not consciously. But the past waited patiently, until the job. Her new boss was the son of the man who destroyed Samira. Recognition hit like a bullet. Voice, gesture, ring. Memories surged back, crashing against the walls of her carefully constructed self. The mind that had protected her for 2 decades began to crumble. She woke up, Sarah said quietly. And she's angry. I realized then that the woman I loved had lived through hell twice, once as Samira, once as Sarah. And now both selves were colliding. But the truth didn't end there. The company she worked for wasn't just toxic, it was criminal. Embezzlement, blackmail, exploitation. Samira recognized the patterns. She had seen this monster before, only older, richer, better hidden. She tried to report it. They fired her. Then they threatened her. That's when the emotional breakdown began. Not weakness but fury. "I won't disappear again," she told me, eyes blazing. Not as a niece. Not as a wife. Not as a woman. She started gathering evidence. Files. Recordings. She stayed up nights, driven by something far stronger than revenge. Justice. I begged her to slow down, to protect herself. "You married me," she replied. "But you married a survivor. And survivors don't stay silent." The final blow came when my own family turned against her. They accused her of lying, of madness, of dishonoring the dead. My mother slapped her when she spoke Samira's name aloud. That night Sarah packed a bag. "If I stay," she said calmly, "I will shrink. And I've done enough disappearing for one lifetime." She walked out, leaving behind her wedding ring on the table. And with it, the question that tore me apart. Had I lost my wife? Or had I just met my aunt? The photograph showed Sarah standing outside her former office, eyes sharp, chin lifted, not afraid. The charge was vague but dangerous. Theft of confidential documents. They wanted to silence her the same way they silenced Samira. But this time, the woman they tried to erase had learned how to fight back. I found her in a small rented apartment near the courthouse. Papers were spread across the floor like a battlefield map. She looked thinner, exhausted, but unbreakable. "They won't win," she said without looking up. "Not this time." The trial that followed shook more than our family. It shook the company, the city, the lies that had stood unchallenged for decades. Evidence poured out. Whistleblowers emerged. Old victims found their voices. Samira's husband's name surfaced again, tied to corruption, abuse, cover-ups that spanned generations. Sarah testified, not as a victim but as a witness. She spoke clearly, fearlessly. She told the court about a woman who had been erased, and another who had been born from survival. She told them about betrayal wrapped in respectability, about silence sold as honor. "I am not broken," she said. "I am proof." The charges against her were dismissed. The investigation expanded. Arrests followed. But freedom came with a cost. Our marriage didn't survive intact. Some wounds heal. Others teach you how to walk differently. When I asked her who she was now, she smiled. A real smile, grounded, whole. "I am both," she said. "And neither name will cage me again." She didn't return to being my wife. Not in the way we once were. But she didn't disappear either. She became something new. An advocate, a voice, a woman who stood for others still trapped in silence. Months later, I saw her on television, speaking at a conference. "Strong. Live." The anchor asked, "Do you consider yourself Samira? Or Sarah?" He paused. "I consider myself a woman who refused to vanish." As I turned off the screen, I finally understood. Nothing had happened to my aunt or my wife. She had happened to the world. And this time she stayed.